research shows very clearly that the things we will regret most in life are the things we didn't even try. We will be haunted by the things we wanted to do but never even gave a shot, more so by the things we gave a shot and perhaps failed with. I always say it is so important to give things a go, because worst case scenario, you learn. Or you build resilience, or you change course of direction, or maybe you redefine the goal. But it is so much better than never having tried.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Unfulfilled podcast. I'm your host, Camille. Thank you so much for tuning in today for an amazing guest episode with Dr. Maike, positive psychology and self-leadership specialist. She's a speaker, coach, and educator, and she focuses on helping you exit the grind and live regret-free. Dr. Maike, welcome to the show.
Hi, Camille. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for coming on today, for taking the time all the way from Australia. So I'm really excited to dive into today's conversation. I want to start by addressing some quotes that you've shared in your content and your work that I think encapsulate the work you do, but also what I love to speak about in Unfulfilled. So I would love your thoughts on some of these quotes. First one is, fulfillment isn't caused so much by achieving goals as it is by pursuing the right ones every day.
Love that you picked that quote, Camille. I think, so one of the terms that comes to mind that we know from positive psychology research, and maybe just for those of you who aren't so familiar, positive psychology is the subdiscipline in psychology that looks at how we can actually live a great life, one of fulfillment and deep engagement and personal growth and quality connections and so forth. So that deep level of happiness. And one of the terms that has come out of positive psychology research is miswanting. So miswanting describes the phenomenon that we often tend to strive for goals that we think will make us happy. But then when we achieve them, we realize that we're kind of feeling flat or empty and not as happy as we thought we would be. So it's just part of something called affective forecasting. So as human beings, we tend to want to anticipate how future events will make us feel. So we just automatically do this. And the same counts for our goals. We anticipate that once we've achieved a certain goal, we will feel very happy. But research shows that we're pretty crap at that, to be quite honest. And so that's what leads to us miswanting. So that we tend to chase goals that we think will make us happy, but then they don't. So what's really important when we achieve or when we strive for goals is that we first really sit down and reflect on the why behind those goals and make sure that we connect them to our values, that we strive for goals that are authentic to us, that we think about how we define success and happiness and don't just strive for the same old goals that everybody else out there strives for because they come with great reputation, like let's say a fancy house or a new car or an amazing career that has a great reputation, but maybe isn't innately fulfilling to us. So it's really important we take that time and reflect and connect the dots to our own values.
Gosh, I really love that. That idea of miswanting. It's so true. And every single one of us are susceptible to that because society is feeding us these messages that we're supposed to want these certain things. We're supposed to aspire for this perfect white picket fence life. That's supposed to look a certain way. And I love hearing stories of people who've quote unquote made it. And let's say they achieve that financial freedom or they have that dream relationship, at least on the outside, or dream career. And in interviews or when you hear them speak about it, they're like, yeah, I didn't really feel anything when I achieved that, or like, yeah, it really didn't give me that happiness that I thought it would, or you hear all these celebrities who you think would be perfectly happy, very unhappy because all those things on the surface that seem so grandiose don't contribute to our true fulfillment.
That is exactly it. And it's those three big words that we often strive for. So wealth, fame, or status that we think will bring us happiness, and they don't. And I just think of this because you mentioned celebrities before. So absolutely, they are not what brings us happiness. And it comes down to almost like a fault in our language because we use this one word, happiness, to describe so many different things. So, and the media, for example, and all the marketing out there, what they make us do is they make us want hedonic happiness. So one type of happiness, hedonic happiness, is the type of happiness that is all about feeling joy and pleasure in the moment. So think, that moment where you find out you've won the lottery, or the moment you buy that brand new car, or you go shopping, or you maybe also have a nice meal with your friends. That's also hedonic happiness. But that's kind of what we end up striving for. But what we actually want in life is something called eudaimonic happiness, because that is that deep, fulfilled type of happiness. So one where we feel like we've achieved meaningful goals, where we feel deeply connected both to ourselves and to other people around us, where we feel like we are accomplishing goals and mastering skills and growing as a person. So that is eudaimonic type of happiness, but that is not what the media portray or make us want to buy, because that's not something you can actually buy. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. It's so interesting too, because as you said, that's not what's fed to us where we think happiness lies, but it really is in the process. And often the process isn't what feels glamorous or really fun and joyful, maybe in the moment. But I love that you phrased it as that's what contributes to our genuine sense of fulfillment. And I personally think it's because when we overcome challenges and when we create something, when we do something we didn't think we could, we boost our confidence. We truly believe that we're worthy of achievement, and we feel better about ourselves, and it creates that foundation to boost our fulfillment.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more, Camille. And it's exactly what you said before, too. Sometimes we have to sacrifice hedonic happiness in order to attain eudaimonic happiness. So sometimes we have to say no to going to that party, or, going shopping and feeling good momentarily in order to, maybe stay home and study to pursue the career that will actually fulfill us, or save up to go on that trip of a lifetime that will actually fulfill us, or something like that. So
I'm so glad you brought that up. And I would argue even most of the time, to achieve eudaimonic happiness, it does take sacrificing the other. I think we can strike a balance, but I don't think true eudaimonic happiness can come and true fulfillment can come without making sacrifices and making choices. And that's what life's all about, right? And I think, circling back, I love what you also said earlier when you were touching on the quote, is coming back to your why. Like, why are you striving for that thing? And I think if your why is really strong and there's passion behind it and it's connected to who you are authentically, I think that why makes it easier to sacrifice those elements.
100%. Yeah, absolutely agree. And what you said just before, it's about striking the right balance. And that's also what research shows. When we look at research that has investigated, which type is more important, is it hedonic happiness? Is it eudaimonic happiness? It's exactly what you're saying. So hedonic happiness is obviously more effective in the short term. Eudaimonic happiness is longer lasting and more effective in the long term. But research shows very clearly we do need both. And it's about striking the right balance. We need hedonic happiness too in order to get through this roller coaster called life, right? To motivate us to get through every day. And that's why I also always say, definitely set some goals and challenge yourself and always grow. I think the worst invention of humanity is retirement, or the idea that let's just hustle now and then at some stage we can just stop. We do not want to stop. We want to keep growing. It's an innate need of ours, but we need to balance it right. We need moments of joy to get us through the hard bits, but we always want to keep growing and, mastering skills, setting new goals, and keep striving.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think I can't even think of one element of life where balance isn't key,
Yeah.
And my advice that I've shared in other episodes is always just to listen to your body to strike that balance. What is your body and soul craving? Is it maybe more of that hedonic happiness or maybe more of that eudaimonic happiness? And it's similar to a diet or exercise versus rest. Like, we need all elements of it in our life. Wow, I'm really glad I started with that quote. Why'd I even list other questions and quotes? We could just make this the whole episode. Another quote I do have listed here that is really similar to this one, so we don't have to dive into it, but I do just want to share it. Success isn't defined by the destination, but by who you become along the way.
Mm, perfect. Yeah,
But
absolutely.
enough said, right?
Yeah, enough said. That's it, right?
This is one I would love to dive into. The fear of failure often causes more pain than failure itself.
Oh, yes, 100%. I mean, how often do we not take action on something that we would love to achieve or do because we are so afraid that it's not going to turn out the way we'd hoped? You know, especially amongst the perfectionists of us, and I count myself as one as well. Often have I not taken action because I was afraid to fail? And I still catch myself out on a weekly basis with exactly that. So, you know, research shows very clearly that the things we will regret most in life are the
Mm.
things we didn't even try. We will be haunted by the things we wanted to do but never even gave a shot, more so by the things we gave a shot and perhaps failed with. So, you know, I always say it is so important to give things a goal because worst case scenario, you learn, you know, or you build resilience, or you change course of direction, or maybe you redefine the goal. But it is so much better than never having tried. And it's really interesting. And it's actually quite sad. Often when I work with coaching clients, you know, some come to me with lots of different goals, and often it's like lots of little goals, and that then they also have this one very big life goal. You know, I've always wanted to move to France, for example. And then we often tweak the little goals first to make the current sort of life circumstances a little bit more comfortable, and also because they're easy and quick wins, so they're very motivating, and we get into a habit of setting goals, pursuing goals, achieving goals, tweaking goals, and so forth. And then at some stage, when we're ready, I'll go, okay, now let's talk about that move to France. And you can tell how nervous they become, and they just want to shy away from it, because it's almost like when we have this big dream, it's like a bubble. We hold it up and we cherish it as this ultimate life goal, and it'll be so amazing. And it's like Disneyland there, right? And we're afraid that once we start to actually try and pursue it, that this bubble will burst into nothingness, because we then realize that it's so much harder to attain than we thought it might be, or we don't have what it takes, or whatever worst case scenario the mind makes up. But you have to really think about what is worse. You know, dying with that big dream, being stuck up there in a bubble, having been completely untouched your entire life, or perhaps having tried and maybe failed to some extent, but tweaked it, but also maybe having succeeded. You know, I think this is a really important quote, and one that is very dear to my heart, because I see people not taking action so often because they're afraid to fail.
That quote that you mentioned in the beginning, that at the end of everyone's life, what people regret the most is not going for the thing, gives me
Yeah.
chills every single time. Whatever
Yeah.
variation of that saying, whenever I hear it, it just immediately like lights this fire in me. Like I gotta go do it now. You know, it just, it's the perfect reminder that life is short. And I think we need that reminder constantly. I think, you know, if that is touching anyone listening, like write it down in a post-it note, look at it every morning, remind yourself to go for things, you know. I think too, failure is a good thing for a couple reasons. If we're failing, that means we're striving for things that are difficult. You know, we're challenging ourselves, we're pushing ourselves, we're not staying in our comfort zones. And B, failure or rejection, whatever you want to call it, rejection is redirection, right? That quote that I also love. This is like a whole quote episode, but I'm really about it. If you fail, it's not a failure. It's redirecting you towards something better or something more aligned for you, you know? So maybe that client you were mentioning, maybe it's not France. Maybe something happened in their process of moving to France and they end up in Spain, and Spain is where they meet the love of their lives, or whatever, like fill in the blanks of whatever you think is a better situation. But I think staying stagnant is the biggest failure.
100%, because then we may as well be dead already. Stagnation
Yeah.
is death, isn't it? And I love what you said before, that life can be so short, and we have to remind ourselves of that. I think we're all so used to being alive. We're all so used to living that we've become blasé about it, that we take each day as granted and not as the precious gift it really is. And I've always been fascinated with people who report on having had a near-death experience or some other traumatic life event that has changed the way they live, where they say, now I really live every day as if it's my last or the greatest gift, and I just take it with both hands and cherish it. And I live with more courage now to pursue the goals I really want to pursue, and maybe to say the things I really think and believe, and live more authentically, and not give so much of a damn about what other people think about what I say or do and how I live. I adore that. And I think we all need to learn from that. I wish we could all live like that without having had a near-death experience or that traumatic life event, because I think that's exactly that difference between flourishing and languishing in life. If we just become so used to living that we become blasé, that we just live on autopilot, and then all these dreams are there and we think, oh, there'll be a chance some other time in the future, or maybe when I'm retired. It doesn't work like that. It never does, because also what we forget is that we're not always going to be as healthy as we might be right now. We might be retired one day and not having to work, but it doesn't mean that we have the physical health to then pursue our dreams, or the energy or whatever that might be.
It's so true. Life is genuinely just meant to be experienced. And because we have this idea of how we think life should look, we live in fear that it's not going to look that way, of it straying from how we think it should look, and that holds us back for reaching for those experiences or taking risks because the outcome's uncertain. And I think that uncertainty terrifies us because we don't know how it's going to turn out. And we want life to be predictable. Otherwise, it's a danger and threat to us. But the alternative, I think, is you live a life within your comfort zone. It's mundane. It doesn't excite you. It doesn't fulfill you. But you know what to expect. You do the same thing day in and day out. Is that better? Or would you rather sprinkle in some uncertainty and live a life of fulfillment and reach that eudaimonic happiness and get to the end of your life actually feeling like you lived?
Well, I know that was a rhetorical question of yours, but research actually shows that we do prefer to take the certainty of our current reality, even though we may not be happy with it, over the uncertainty of potential happiness in a different reality if we were to take different action. We prefer certainty, even if it means we're unhappy, over uncertainty, even if it could bring us happiness. How messed up is that?
That's really
And I
upsetting.
think it's so upsetting. And you said before, uncertainty, how did you word it? Uncertainty is
Terrifies
like
us.
it terrifies us. And it really does. It's the worst thing psychologically for our minds. Uncertainty is the worst. And I wish they would teach kids at school how to handle and tolerate more uncertainty. Mental fitness is something that is still so neglected in society.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Hence why I love the work you're doing, hence why I started the work I'm doing. It is crazy. In school, we only learn these intellectual things, and I think more and more the need is coming up for mindfulness to be taught, for mental resilience, for how to live a fulfilling life, and none of that's really discussed. And especially if you're in a household where you're not taught it by your parents, of course, people are just going through the motions because we're not really taught otherwise. A couple other things that hold people back from living a truly happy and fulfilling life that I would love to dive into a little bit more with you. You mentioned one of these, caring what other people think. So many of us walk around constantly consuming our headspace with, oh, what does that person think of me? Even if it's a stranger on the street or even if it's someone they don't like, it's constantly on our minds. What's your advice for someone who is holding themselves back because they're scared of what others are going to think of them, or that they're going to judge them, or just have this fear that people are going to neglect them and judge them for being their authentic selves.
The number one thing I would say is that as human beings, we always think we are so flawless cognitively, right? We always think we're these cognitive human beings who think rationally and logically most of the time. Research shows very clearly we are so far from it. We have so many errors in our thinking. Our brains and the way we process information is so flawed. That means we have lots of cognitive biases, so errors in our thinking. One of them is a thing called the spotlight effect. We think everybody worries about us when really everybody just worries about themselves. So
100%.
it's a very, very healthy practice or habit to keep that in the back of the mind, that no one really gives a damn about you. And I know this sounds so bad, and I don't mean it in the way that no one cares about, when you're feeling sad or upset, especially not people who are around you and people who love you, but strangers on the street, or really what you wear or what color you dye your hair or whatever, especially the little things, no one cares. So just keep that in the back of the mind when you think other people are judging you or look at you strangely or whatever. Chances are they are just concerned with themselves and what other people think about them. So just keep that in the back of the mind. The other thing is tapping into your courage, connecting with your why, with your values again, and also understanding that, people will always judge you. It doesn't matter what you do. Someone will always judge you for something. So you may as well live in line with who you really are, and then be judged for whatever things other people have a problem with. But there's also this saying, those who matter don't mind, and those who mind don't matter. And I adore that quote. I don't know who it's by. I always forget.
And it's so true. The right people won't judge you. The right people will always support you. And I think of it this way too. If people are going to judge you and people are going to pull back in your life, if you make a change, if you decide to live to your fullest potential and be authentic, if those people pull back, they're doing you a favor, because those people are not meant to be in your life, to be in your destiny. And to me, that means that you're creating space for people to enter who will up level with you and support you, and you can support each other through that process. You don't want to surround yourself by these people you have to tiptoe around or dim your light around.
Love your thinking, Camille. I couldn't agree more. It's such a good way to filter out people who are actually harmful to you and your well-being, and as you said, make space for those who are really valuable. I know it feels tough. It's always tough to say bye to people, and it's tough. It's loss, it will feel like loss, and it will hurt, but sometimes that's a good hurt, So,
I like to remind myself too, it's never actually about you, unless you maybe intentionally maliciously did something to a friend. But if we're talking simply about the fact that someone's maybe projecting judgment onto you, it's always them. They're projecting some insecurity of their own. And I always like to remind myself of that whenever I find myself worrying about someone judging me, or if I get a sense of judgment or lack of support from someone, I pause and remind myself, oh, they're just projecting something onto me, and I'm going to just immediately let it go and not dwell on that.
Absolutely. What other people say about you says so much more about them than it says about you, 100%. Because we have to keep in mind, why would other people judge? Other people judge to make you small. That means they feel small to start off with. And by making you smaller, that is a strategy to make themselves feel bigger. So keep that in mind. Or there is a psychological term called cognitive dissonance. So how many times have you done something, someone's judged you negatively for it, and then maybe a year later they did the same thing? I think everybody, all of your listeners, have probably experienced this at some stage in their life. So what might have happened was that by you doing the thing the other person actually wanted to do themselves, it caused friction in their mind, discomfort, because it reminded them that this is something they actually wanted to do, and yet they haven't done it yet. And it feels uncomfortable. And one of the strategies our minds apply very quickly, often automatically, often without us even being aware of it, is to change a belief around that in the way that we then say, that's not worth pursuing. Why would anyone want to do that? So they judge you negatively like that so that they feel better about themselves not having done it yet. So lots of reasons why people judge others negatively, because the thing is, of course, sometimes people disagree, but if you genuinely just disagree with someone, but you come from a place of stability and, let's say, confidence and wholesomeness or whatever, you don't actually feel the need to rub it in their face and say something negatively to them, do you? It's fine to disagree. We all need to be able to disagree with one another, but to negatively judge someone in that way, that usually comes from a place of feeling small and incomplete.
I love that. Couldn't have said it better myself. I'm going to put a cherry on top of that. So, you speak about this idea that growth is not linear. What do you mean by that?
Well, I don't know about your experience in life, but often, we set goals and we start striving for them, and we might have small wins in the beginning until we don't. We all have setbacks along the journey. And what I see all the time is that once people experience the first little setback, and they will come because we cannot predict the future. We cannot possibly anticipate everything that's going to happen for us, to us on this journey towards the goal. So there will always be things we didn't account for that don't play in our favor. But what I see happen all the time is that once people experience the first little bit of a setback, they think, now I failed, or maybe I don't have what it takes. I'm not good enough. I'll never get there. So they see that as the end station, whereas setbacks are part of our goal journey and our success journey. And I just wish that everyone understood this, that growth is never linear. It's not ever just going up, 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 closer to the goal. There'll be setbacks all along the way, and they will be important. And I just wish people wouldn't take that as an indicator to give up.
Absolutely. And I love that you said that they're important because, as we said earlier, the failures are actually redirecting us. But I think another thing that we didn't really touch on is they make us more resilient. It's, I think, in pushing through these setbacks and navigating obstacles and uncertain, unexpected scenarios that come up, that's how we learn and grow and get stronger. And then the next time a setback comes, we know that we're able to push through it and we have the resources and the knowledge to do so. So I do think that they're really important. So I love that you commented on that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just like climbing a mountain, every little bit of a climb you do, closer to the bottom of the mountain, will help you build the muscles to actually get, and the endurance to actually get to the top. It's just exactly the same. So 100% we build resilience, and that resilience is what we need as the setbacks become maybe bigger or more challenging.
Yeah. And I think there's going to be bigger setbacks, the bigger the goal that we're striving for. The more we up level, I think the setbacks get bigger, but we become more capable. Nothing's thrown our way that we can't handle, I believe, and we just have to remind ourselves that we can and be our biggest supporter through those times. So speaking of being your biggest supporter, the importance of forgiving yourself. Why is it really important to forgive ourselves, not only others?
Because the thing is, if we carry shame and regret or any feelings like that are sort of negative towards ourselves, we know that this is just a burden. It's a mental load or like an energetic burden that won't support us. It's not useful. It's not constructive in any shape or form to help us achieve any goals. I mean, what is the advantage of, carrying shame like that. I think we're all human, and we need to remember that. Common humanity, by the way, is one of the 3 elements of self-compassion, according to Christine Neff as well. Common humanity, meaning that we all are flawed. None of us is perfect. We all make mistakes. We all have sides to ourselves that maybe we don't like, that are maybe not so worth striving for, but that is okay. We're all in the same boat, and we're all human. And if we can forgive ourselves and be kind to ourselves instead, which is, by the way, another element of self-compassion, according to Christine Neff, we can actually support ourselves, and we can grow, and we can overcome those flaws, that we might have had, or we can overcome some challenges we haven't been able to overcome in the past. So I am a huge believer of forgiveness, both towards ourselves and others. And I just want to be very clear. It doesn't mean agreeing, or it doesn't mean condoning actions, past actions, not in ourselves and not in others either. If I might have done something in the past that I still don't agree with, that I still don't condone, I still don't want to ever do again in the future, that is fine. We all make mistakes. We're all humans. So I don't have to agree with that in order to forgive myself for being human in that way. And it's the same for others. Why would you, hold a grudge towards others? Forgive them too. Just let it go. Give yourself that peace of mind. And again, it doesn't mean that you condone other people's behaviors either. But research shows very clearly that being self-compassionate in that way makes us so much more resilient, productive, innovative, creative. It really frees up so much energy. So I'm a huge believer of self-forgiveness.
It is amazing that the way that we talk to ourselves is often never the way that we would talk to a friend or someone we
Yeah.
love. And
Oh, yeah.
it's so important to start to train ourselves to be kinder to ourselves, to consistently have these positive thoughts, not these negative self-deprecating thoughts. Because if we constantly are down on ourselves, then it's going to be really hard to forgive ourselves and be kind to ourselves. And I very much agree that that is the first step to being successful and being happy in life, is we have to understand that we're human, we're imperfect. And I think that's also why it's so effective to be open about what we're feeling and be vulnerable to others and express what we're actually feeling and experiencing through, I know, both of our content. That's our goal and mission. And why we do that is to make others feel less alone, to connect us more, to remind us that we are all human beings, rather than, posting just super curated, edited content on social media and pretending like everyone's perfect and fine. I think that makes people feel far more alone and feel it's harder to be kinder to themselves because they maybe think everyone else is perfect. But I think the more that we're vulnerable and the more that we remind each other that we're all in this together, having this shared human experience, and we're all imperfect and make mistakes, I think the better off we'll all be.
Oh, that was so beautifully said, Camille. Honestly, hanging on to every word you just said there. And you started off by saying we tend to be our own worst critics, right? And that is so true. And again, research supports this too. It is so sad. And I really want to invite everyone out there to just embrace it as an experiment. I know it can feel so challenging. I don't know exactly why, because maybe we feel as though when we are kinder to ourselves and more self-compassionate, we are afraid we lower our bar, and that then we'll just slack off. Research shows the exact opposite is true. But I would love to invite everyone just to embrace this as an experiment. Just do it for 1 week and speak to yourself the way you would speak to your best friend as you go through each day. Just treat it as an experiment. Just embrace it for a moment and see what happens. I can tell you, I used to be my own worst critic. I used to beat myself up so hard. And becoming more self-compassionate, and this is something we can all learn, has really changed my life for the better. And it makes us more compassionate towards others too. And remember that, at the end of the day, we all want to live happy and fulfilled lives. Well, flourishing and fulfillment a key component, and possibly the biggest component of that, is deep connection, both to ourselves and to others. And I promise you, self-compassion is a key to that.
Couldn't agree more. God, that's so beautifully said as well. And I think one very effective way that I've improved my self-talk are daily affirmations. So if anyone is wondering how to have an effective way to improve their self-talk every day, even if you're just getting ready for the day or getting ready to go to bed, just have them on in the background. These affirmations that remind you how amazing you are and uplift you. And then whether you realize it or not, your brain starts to absorb them.
Beautiful tip. And maybe just because I am a little bit of a perfectionist and I know that I just mentioned 2 out of the 3 elements of self-compassion the entire time, I'm going to give you the third, because this is how I practice it. So the very first one is actually mindful awareness. So picking ourselves up when we have those moments where we are overly harsh on ourselves. So just noticing those moments, because it all starts with that awareness. And then just making sure that we don't judge ourselves for that, for judging ourselves, but to just notice when it's happening, taking note of that, being okay with that. So that is the very first step. Then the second one will be to acknowledge common humanity, which I've mentioned before. We are all like that. We are all flawed like that. It is okay. We're all human. We'll make mistakes. And the third being self-kindness, asking yourself, what do I actually need right now? And what might I be able to do to support myself through this?
That's great advice. And those are very easy steps to do. So everyone listening should go do them. Try them out this week. That's your homework assignment. Final question for you, Dr. Maike. So whether it be for anyone listening or advice you'd give to your clients, let's say someone is just, going through the motions. They're stuck in their comfort zones, not feeling fulfilled, not feeling that eudaimonic happiness. What's the biggest piece of advice that you'd offer them today?
There are so many pieces of advice I could give right now, but if you ask me
we
for
had a whole
one,
episode of them, but what's your final piece of advice?
Pay attention to what lights your fire, what puts your soul on fire. Reconnecting with your joy also means reconnecting with your passions, with who you are, with what interests you, with your values. What lights your fire? Reconnect with that. Pay attention to that.
I just got chills. Dr. Maike, you're so incredible. Thank you so much for coming on today. Where can everyone listening find more of you?
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Camille. I loved this chat. People can find me on Instagram at theflourishingdoc or on my website, theflourishingdoc.com. Also love to connect on LinkedIn at Dr. Maike Neuhaus, which is probably hard to spell correctly. So head to my
It'll
website
be in the show
and all
notes.
the links are there. Yeah, excellent.
Thanks, Dr. Maike.
Thank you.
So that is all for today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode of Unfulfilled. I'm so grateful that you took this time for yourself to learn, to grow, and to live a more fulfilling life. I would love it if you sent this to a friend or family member who you thought of during this episode or who would love the show. And again, follow or subscribe wherever you are listening. And I'll see you all again soon on your journeys to becoming more fulfilled.